Honorable State picking our calls, they made up their minds.
So no agreement.
This is Atlantic Television Network. First, the highlights. In Malawi, Vice President buried as President calls for probe. Chilima was laid to rest on Monday in his village south of the capital, following a funeral where President Lazarus Chakwera called for an independent probe into his death in a plane crash. Chilima and 9 other people died in the plane crash last week in the search for this plane. I would like to assure you Malawians that this accident will be investigated by an independent expert, Chakwera said amidst boos and jeers from the crowd. Hundreds of soldiers, police officers and forest rangers had searched for more than 24 hours before the wreckage was discovered in a forest plantation south of Mzunzu. It was on a long way to the northern city of Mzunzu when morning. Chakwera had said earlier that air traffic controllers had told the plane not because of the bad weather and poor visibility and to return can be credible on its own, which is why the body was laid to rest, followed by a long trumpet post and a reveal laid reds included the Central African Republic have increased, complicating a security landscape that has seen a spillover of the conflict in neighboring Sudan. United Nations experts warn in a new report. The panel of experts confirmed reports of air raids by the Sudanese military around border areas and the Central African Republic. Sudan plunged into a conflict in the mid-April 2023 when long simmering tensions between its military leaders broke out in the capital, Khartoum. Fighting spread to other regions, including Darfur, which borders the Central African Republic's northern Vakaga region. The United Nations says 14,000 people have been killed and 33,000 injured in the Sudan fight. The expert panel, which monitors sanctions on mercenaries and armed groups in the Central African Republic, said that the United Nations had registered almost 10,700 Sudanese refugees who had fled across the border by late March. It said that 565 new refugees, the vast majority women and children, arrived at the Kosi refugee camp in northern city of Birao every week. The war in Sudan has also disrupted the important trade and transportation routes between the Central African Republic and Sudan's Darfur region through the border in Vakaga or in Koto, more insecure after the past year, and aid delivery slower and more expensive than the panel has said. The Central African Republic remains one of the poorest countries in the world. 3 days earlier by the country's military and Russian instructors on fire from the UPC rebel group at the Bara mine. UPC fighters were reportedly killed and 30 captured, the expert said in a report which was released on Friday. The panel's activities by the Lord's Resistance Army, a brutal accused recruiting boys to fight and using girls as sex slaves have also been disrupted by the war in Sudan. The LRA is led by one of the world's most wanted men, Joseph Kony, who formed the group in his native Uganda and then scattered his followers across parts of Central Africa. The International Criminal Court said in March it will present evidence to back charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity and leveled at Kony. First ever hearing in absentia starting October 15th. Arrived in Uganda last July. Their reports quoted media reports as saying Ali Kony from his father's in July 2021. On to some news from Asia. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dissolved the influential war cabinet that has overseen the fighting in Gaza, the government spokesperson said on Monday. A member of the body bolted from the government over frustration with the Israeli leaders. The guards sent nationalist allies who oppose a ceasefire that could challenge to the already fragile negotiations to end the 8-month war in Gaza. Government officials said Netanyahu would hold smaller forums for sensitive issues, including with his security cabinet, with a far-right government who oppose ceasefire deals and have voiced support for reoccupying Gaza. The war cabinet was the war when Gantz, then an opposition party leader, and Netanyahu's rival joined the coalition in the 7th attack on Israel by Hamas. He demanded the body stir the war in a bid to sideline far-right members of Netanyahu's government. It was made up of 3 members, Gantz, Netanyahu, and the Gallant. The move to scrap the war cabinet comes as Israel faces more pivotal decisions weighing the for a ceasefire in exchange for release hostages taken by Hamas during are still fighting in the southern city of Rafah. Hamas resurgence elsewhere, in addition to a dramatic escalation last week on the North Lebanon after launching hundreds of rockets and drones towards Israel in some of the most intense barrages in the conflict. Hezbollah sharply reduced the number of projectiles fired towards northern Israel on Sunday and Monday. The full after Israeli military officers said that they killed a key of the department, Muhammad Ayub, in a drone attack on Monday morning. The Israeli military said it tried Monday from Lebanon and they did not enter Israeli territory. In the past 48 hours, there were just 6 launches, down from more than 200. The lull could be due to the Muslim feast of Eid Sunday morning, as well as a advisor to the Joe Biden in Israel. Israel discussed the volatile and made several trips to the region in recent months, whose Hezbollah began attacking Israel almost immediately after Israel-Hamas war erupted, and daily exchanges of been then. In recent weeks, they have fires breaking out on both sides of the border. Former Thailand Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra was granted release on bail hours after he was formerly indicted on Tuesday on a charge of political figure despite being ousted from power 13 years ago. 18 years ago, reported himself to prosecute Price. Bedra Guna, a spokesperson for the Office of the Attorney General, said at a news conference a car believed to be carrying Thaksin arrived at the criminal court in Bangkok, but he did not come out to meet the reporters. Chatmore 3 told reporters that Thaksin was ready to enter the judicial process. A few hours later, the criminal court said Thaksin's bail release was approved with a bond worth 500,000 baht, that is $13,000, on the condition that he cannot travel out of the land unless he receives permission from the court. The same car left the court shortly after without Thaksin being seen. The law on defaming the monarchy, an offense known as lèse-majesté, is punishable by 3 to 15 years in prison. Such laws globally and increasingly Thaksin, now 74, was ousted by an army coup in 2006 that set off years of deep political polarization. His opponents, who were generally staunch royalists, of corruption, abuse of power, and disrespecting Bumbol Aduyade, who died in 2016. He was originally charged with lèse-majesté in 2016 for remarks he made a year earlier to journalists in South Korea. In 2008, to avoid punishment from other legal judgments he decried as political, he voluntarily returned to Thailand last year, taken into for convictions related to corruption and abuse, but served virtually his entire villages and burying crops. Meanwhile, northern parts of the country are battling drought as the country fails rain. Severe downpours started on Sunday afternoon, with authorities measuring period. At least 378 houses collapsed in the county, and 800 hectares of crops were damaged, amounting to economic losses. At 415 million yuan in Uping, authorities have said. Officials in the news agency in the southern Guangzhou, bordering Hong Kong, landslide struck by severe flooding killed at least 5 people in the city of Meizhou. 15 others are missing, according to local media reports. More than 130,000 households in Meizhou experienced power outages, with some neighboring towns and villages out of contact as of Monday. 3 helicopters and more than 200 teams of rescuers were searching for survivors and delivering aid to the affected areas, according to local authorities. More than 11,000 people were moved after the Hangzhou River in South China Pearl River Basin flooded, droughts, and inundating homes, evacuated due to flooding in several counties. Meanwhile, including the capital, Beijing, have endured high temperatures in recent days. However, rainfall is suspected in the drought-hit areas. Several dead and missing emergency management. South Korean soldiers fired warning shots to repel North Korean soldiers who temporarily crossed the rival's land border on Tuesday for the second time this month, South Korean military have said. The South's military observed increase in North Korean construction activities along their heavily armed border to install suspected anti-tank barriers, reinforce roads, and plant landmines. The work has gone on uninterrupted despite several explosions caused by mines that killed or injured an unspecified number of North Korean soldiers, said the South Joint Chiefs of Staff. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, around 20 leadership attempts to strengthen its combat over its people, over its control over its people. The border intrusions came as tensions rise between the war-divided rivals who in recent weeks have engaged in Cold War-style psychological warfare and made it clear that they are no longer bound by their landmark military agreements in 2018 to reduce tensions. The Korea's heavily fortified border, referred to as the demilitarized zone, has occasionally been a site of bloodshed and violence. And Vival's military demarcation line marks the border between the two Koreas within the MZ, which is 248 kilometers, 154 miles long, and 4 kilometers wide. The zone is strewn with an estimated 2 million mines and also guarded by barbed wire fences, tank traps, and combat troops on both sides. It's a legacy of 1950 to 1953 Korean War, which ended with an armistice, not a peace treaty. Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked North Korea for sanctions as he headed to Pyongyang on Tuesday for a summit with North Korea leader Kim Jong-un. Putin's comments appeared on an op-ed piece in North Korea's state media hours arrived in North for a two-day visit as the country is deepening their North Korea is under heavy UN Security Council economic sanctions over its nuclear weapons and missile programs. Partners over its aggression in Ukraine. Putin said that the countries will also expand cooperation in tourism, culture, and education. Putin's visit comes amidst growing concerns about an armed provides Moscow with badly needed munitions to fuel Putin's war. Transfers that would enhance the threat posed by Kim's nuclear weapons and missile programs. The other exchanges between North Korea and Russia have sharply increased since Kim visited the Russian Far East in September for a meeting with Putin, their first since 2019. India and United States on Monday pledged to boost defense and technology cooperation and remove long-standing barriers to bilateral strategic trade following a meeting between the national security advisors of both countries. The National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on a two-day visit to the Indian capital, New Delhi, the first from a high-ranking U.S. official since Prime Minister Narendra Modi secured a third straight. Earlier this month, Sullivan met with counterpart Ajit Doval to discuss progress on the initiative on critical emerging technologies, which the two countries launched in 2022. The initiative set a path for collaboration on semiconductor production and developing artificial intelligence and was critical in sealing a deal that will allow United States-based General Electric to partner with India's Hindustan Aeronautics to produce jet engines in India. On Monday, the two officials emphasized the need for more collaboration with a focus to funding innovative research in areas like semiconductor manufacturing, clean energy, and machine learning. They also discussed the possible co-production of land warfare systems, according to Sullivan. Also held talks with Modi in which the two reaffirmed their commitment to bolstering ties between New Delhi and Washington, and he met with Foreign Minister Subramanian Jaishankar on Tuesday. Sullivan is expected to meet with industry and business leaders. India and the US have grown closer recently as both countries eye China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region with caution, and Modi was honored with a pomp-filled state visit last year, where he and US President Joe Biden called for the US relationships amongst the most consequential in the world. But ties have also been tested after US prosecutors last year accused an Indian government official of orchestrating a plot to murder nationalists. Sikh separatist leader in New York. Sullivan's visit to New Delhi comes as an Indian national was extradited to the US from the Czech Republic to face charges of murder for hire and conspiracy to commit murder for hire in relation to the assassination plot, which was foiled by the US officials. These changes were the second recent accusations of complicity by Indian government officials in attempts to kill Sikh separatist figures living in North America. In September, Canadian Prime Minister allegations that the Indian government had links to the assassination in that country of Sikh activist Ija rejected through those accusations. He set up an investigative committee to look into the U.S. allegations.
From the land across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-the-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentary. Updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today. Only on Atn.
People into the country illegally. That is a matter. You human trafficker.
Honorable they are not picking our calls. They made up their minds.
So no agreement with the EU, but
Every day, our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics,
Nobody's ambition is what the blood.
I have fought very firmly.
natural occurrence.
Everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
Driver, why you just a jack or something and down like this?
I hope nobody got it. Hello.
Why you ask? Oh,
Because this road where they see so you no guarantee safe delivery. Oh.
Welcome on Atlantic Television Network. Leaders of the European Union countries reached no final agreement on candidates for the bloc's top jobs on Monday, but several Charles circulated in Brussels for months. Former Portuguese Socialist Prime Minister Antonio Costa is frequently mentioned job, the role of Council President. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, well known for her tough line on Russia, has been floated as the bloc's potential top diplomat. Under the EU's treaties, candidates should reflect the results of the elections, the winners. 64 people were missing in the Mediterranean Sea and several were rescued after their ship. In a separate shipwreck, rescue workers evacuated dozens of suspected migrants but found 10 bodies trapped below the deck of a wooden boat off Italy's tiny Lampedusa island, the German aid group Rescue Ship wrote. On Monday, on the kilometers of Calabria, had set off from Turkey 8 days earlier but caught fire and overturned, the United Nations agency said, citing survivors. The search and rescue operation started following a Mayday call by a French boat. The Italian Coast Guard said in a statement the boat was sailing in a border area where Greece and Italy carry out search and rescue operations. They trespassed where it repeatedly ran a 100-car train carrying crude oil across the tribe's reservation. United States District Judge Robert Lasnik initially ruled last year that the rule that allows after week, year after year, over our objections. Steve Edwards, chairman of the Swinomish Indian tribal community, said in a statement, when there are those kinds of profits to be gained, the only way to deter future wrongdoing is to do exactly what the courts did today, make the trespasser give up the money it gained by trespassing. The compel exploded in Alabama, North Dakota, and Quebec. A federal agency warned in 2014 that the oil has a higher degree of volatility than other crudes in the United States. Last year, 2 BNSF engines derailed in the Swinomish land, leaking an estimated 3,100 gallons of diesel fuel near Padilla Bay. In a move reminiscent of her political mentor, incoming Mexican President Claudia, which are not binding in any way, are a page from the playbook of her political mentor, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who will be succeeded by Sheinbaum the first. Critics have questioned the use of the public surveys, calling them more of a public relations ploy to help build momentum to pass legislation. Lopez Obrador carried out one of his own campaign promises 6 years ago when he submitted a partially built $13 billion Mexico City airport project to a national consultation between his own election and taking office. That survey also came down on his side and he cancelled the project upon becoming president. In another survey, respondents overwhelmingly supported his pet project, the Maya train, which now carries tourists around the when the National Electoral Institute referendum in 2021 on whether former presidents should be prosecuted for wrongdoing over voter turnout was so low that it didn't approach the level necessary to make it binding. Lopez Obrador has said that he would pursue 20 constitutional changes after his Morena party won a 2/3 majority in Congress in the June 2nd elections. They include May 10th and 16th. They had margins of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. The surveys asked 5 questions, including whether participants be transparency in Mexico. Lee Kuen ends his Australian tour on Tuesday in the vast coastal city in the west coast city of Perth, and he will focus on China's investment in critical minerals and clean energy. Lee last week became the first Chinese premier to visit New Zealand, then Australia, in 7 years. Later Tuesday, he is to become the first premier to visit Malaysia since 2015. Lee, China's second most powerful leader after President Xi Jinping, will inspect minor Fortescue's clean energy research facility in Perth. Forrest said that Lee was interested in the company's plans to produce iron emissions and potential green iron. I think China chose us because it's not just the best technology to go green in Australia, it's the best technology to go green in the world, and we've got real examples of it